Nobody asked Bad Bunny if he wanted to be the greatest. He just showed up again and again and then again after that until Spotify had no choice but to look at its own data, blink twice, and quietly hand him a crown that nobody else was close to wearing. Bad Bunny, whose real name is Benito Antonio Martinez Ocasio, has officially become the artist with the most songs surpassing 1 billion streams each in the entire history of Spotify. Not the most streams overall, not the most listeners in a week, not the most playlists saved. Songs. Individual songs. 32 of them, each one crossing 1 billion streams on its own. Let that number sit for a second. 32. Because most artists, talented, hardworking, celebrated artists, would retire happy with one. One song with 1 billion streams is a career. It is a legacy. It is the kind of thing that gets played at award shows decades later while the artist stands on stage looking emotional and the crowd acts like they always knew it would happen. One song with 1 billion streams is enough to put your name in the conversation forever. Bad Bunny has 32 of them. And the most alarming part, he does not look tired. Welcome to Pop Showroom, where we bring you the stories behind the headlines. If you're not subscribed yet, hit that button right now because this story goes deeper than anything you've seen in the mainstream media. To understand why 32 is such a strange and almost offensive number, it helps to understand what 1 billion streams actually represents in the real world. 1 billion streams on Spotify means 1 billion individual plays. 1 billion times a human being, somewhere on this planet, in some city, in some mood, in some moment, pressed play on that specific song. That is not passive listening. That is not a song playing in the background of a store. That is 1 billion deliberate choices. 1 billion times someone said with their finger or their voice or their remote, yes, this one. Now multiply that by 32. 32 songs. 32 billion individual moments of someone choosing Bad Bunny over every other option available to them. And there are a lot of options. Spotify has approximately 100 million tracks, 100 million songs sitting in a catalog, all competing for the same ears, the same moods, the same afternoons and late nights and long drives. Bad Bunny has 32 of them past 1 billion. The math alone should make a person suspicious. It almost feels like a glitch, like somewhere in Spotify's system a number rolled over incorrectly and nobody caught it. But the numbers are real, the streams are real, and the record is now officially, undeniably his. Not long ago, the man holding this record was The Weeknd, Abel Tesfaye, the artist who made Heartbreak sound like a luxury car commercial, and somehow made that a compliment, had built up 31 songs with over 1 billion streams each. That was the number to beat. That was the wall. And honestly, it looked like a wall that would stand for a while. The Weeknd has decades of catalog. He has global hits in multiple languages of emotion, sadness, obsession, and more sadness. He has collaborated with everyone. He has soundtracked Super Bowl halftimes. He has put out music under different names in different styles across different eras and somehow kept every version of himself relevant. He had the kind of staying power that makes industry executives sleep well at night. He also had 31 songs over 1 billion streams, which until very recently was the most any single artist had ever managed in the history of digital streaming. And then Benito came along and knocked the wall down. Quietly, almost casually, the way someone moves furniture in the middle of the night without waking anyone up, and in the morning the whole room is rearranged and nobody can explain exactly when it happened. The song that pushed him over the edge? Tarot, his collaboration with J.H. Coe, lifted from the album Un Verano Sin Ti. A song so smooth it almost does not feel like history being made when it plays. It does not feel like a record-breaking moment. It does not feel like the final piece of something historic clicking into place. It just feels like a Sunday. A warm, unhurried, very historically significant Sunday. That is the thing about the way Bad Bunny breaks records. He does not make it feel like a heist. He makes it feel like inevitability. J.H. Coe, whose real name is Jesus Manuel Nieves Cortez, is one of the most respected voices in the Latin trap and reggaeton space. He has been building his own catalog quietly and carefully, earning critical praise without always getting the mainstream headlines his music deserves. He is, by every measure, a serious artist, and Bad Bunny put him on the song that became historic. Spotify has roughly 600 million active users around the world. For a song to reach 1 billion streams, it needs to be played, on average, more than once by every active user on the platform. That's the baseline. And that assumes every single person on Spotify has streamed the song, which is obviously not the case. In reality, 1 billion streams means a smaller group of listeners playing a song many, many times. That is not passive consumption. That is devotion. People are not stumbling onto Bad Bunny songs and letting them play once while they scroll through something else. People are returning to these songs repeatedly, over months, over years. They're choosing these songs the way people used to choose records to put on a party or a CD to keep in a car for the whole summer. The relationship is not casual. It is familiar. It is the kind of listening that turns a song into a memory. And Bad Bunny has 32 songs that have earned that relationship with enough people to collectively surpass 1 billion plays each. That is not algorithm. That is not marketing. That is people genuinely, deeply, repeatedly choosing his music over everything else available to them. At the beginning of March, just a few weeks before Tarot crossed the billion mark, Bad Bunny had 29 songs with over 1 billion streams. He celebrated that moment with his Spotify Billions Club live show, a performance, a milestone wrapped in music and shared with the people who put him there. An event that, by any reasonable standard, was already the end of something historic. 29 songs. That was already a number no one else in Spotify's history had reached. And then, in what can only be described as a very deliberate flex disguised as organic growth, he went from 29 to 32. 3 more songs crossed 1 billion streams in just weeks. Not months, weeks. Think about what that means. While Bad Bunny was celebrating having 29 billion stream songs, while the internet was writing headlines about that number, while people were processing what 29 even means in this context, 3 more songs were quietly climbing toward the milestone in real time. The celebration was still happening, and the record was already being extended. The suspicious part is not that it happened. The suspicious part is how quietly it happened. No massive campaign, no industry rollout, no carefully timed single drop engineered to game the algorithm, no announcement, no countdown. Just streams. Consistent, relentless. Every corner of the world streams from people who have apparently decided, collectively and without coordination, that Bad Bunny is not a phase they are going to outgrow. That level of sustained, organic streaming power should not be possible. And yet here the data sits, very calm and very unbothered, telling everyone exactly what happened. Which raises a question nobody in the music industry wants to answer out loud. What exactly is the ceiling here? Because every time someone draws a line, Benito steps over it without looking down. Every time someone says this is the peak moves. Every time the record seems settled, it opens up again. At what point does the industry stop treating this as an achievement and start treating it as a warning? Bad Bunny raps and sings almost entirely in Spanish. Not occasionally, not as a crossover strategy, not as a featured verse on someone else's track designed to capture a demographic, almost entirely in Spanish, the language that the music industry, for most of its modern history, treated as a ceiling rather than a launch pad. There is a long, uncomfortable history in the music business of telling Spanish-language artists that to truly succeed globally, they needed to sing in English, that the path to mainstream acceptance required a specific kind of assimilation. Artists were encouraged, sometimes subtly, sometimes not, to cross over, to translate, to make their music legible to audiences that had already decided what global meant and what language it was supposed to speak. Bad Bunny looked at that history and kept rapping in Spanish, and now he is the artist with the most billion-stream songs in the history of the platform. That is not a footnote, that is the entire story. Because what he has proven in data that cannot be argued with is that the language was never the barrier. The assumption that non-English music had a ceiling was the barrier. And he did not try to dismantle that assumption through press releases or think pieces or carefully positioning. He just released music in Spanish to a world that turned out to be far more willing to listen than the industry had ever given them credit for. The 32 songs are not just a record, they are a correction. A long overdue correction to a very old and very wrong idea about what music the world is willing to love. It would be dishonest not to acknowledge the uncomfortable position this record puts every other major artist in. Because the artists who are closest to this milestone, the ones with 20, 25, 28 songs over 1 billion streams, have spent years building those numbers. They have released consistent music. They have toured relentlessly. They have stayed culturally relevant through trends that come and go. They have done everything right by every conventional measure. And Bad Bunny is now 6 songs ahead of the previous record holder. 6. That is not a narrow margin. That is not a photo finish. That is a gap that suggests the race was not as close as it may have looked from the outside. For the artists watching this number grow, the question is not just how did he get here? The question is, how do we close that distance? And the honest answer, based on what the data shows, is that closing that distance requires the kind of organic, deeply embedded audience connection that cannot be manufactured on a timeline. It either builds or it does not. And for Bad Bunny, it has been building for years without any sign of slowing. That is the part that should keep other artists up at night. Not the number, the trajectory. 32 songs, each one carrying 1 billion streams like it's nothing. An album 4 years deep, still running laps around newer releases. A record that sat safe with The Weeknd until it simply didn't anymore. 3 additional songs crossing the milestone in a matter of weeks, while the celebration for the previous milestone was still in progress. Bad Bunny did not chase this. That is the part that should make every other artist in the world slightly uncomfortable. He did not engineer this. He did not release 32 calculated singles with carefully designed rollout strategies. He made music, albums, projects with themes and textures and moods. Music that was made to be felt, not optimized to be streamed. And the world, all corners of it, in every time zone, speaking every language, decided to show up in numbers that have never been seen before. The record belongs to him now. And based on everything the numbers are saying, based on the trajectory, the consistency, the 4-year-old album that is still making history, the songs that keep climbing without campaigns, he is not done yet. Not even close.